October 2020 report emphasized the critical role of migrants in recovery of global economic development post-COVID-19. The report highlights that this crisis presents an opportunity to reimagine human mobility by reaffirming our global commitment to existing frameworks, and we can ensure that migrants are not only not left behind but can contribute fully to future socio-economic recovery and preparedness. As we have been noticing in the recent couple of weeks that how things change and how the various sectors and companies are doing well, much more better than pre-COVID levels because of more efficiencies. They emerged. People are working from home. A lot of logistics problems solved, and the efficiency level has increased. So that is the opportunity pandemic provided, though of course it is a difficult period. India is an important country for international labor migration. The immigration flows over past decade have more than doubled, and this growth, notwithstanding effects of COVID, will likely to accelerate, spurred by sustained economic and social changes, rapid urbanization, and better communication facilities, and presence of strong social migration networks. Currently, Indian diaspora is over 31 million, comprising people of Indian origin and also non-resident Indians across the world, ranging from North America, Middle East, Europe, Southeast Asia, Australia, and of late emerging trend is in the East Asia and Southeast Asia also. Size and spatial scope of overseas Indian community underlines the importance of studying international migration from interdisciplinary and holistic perspective. Scholars, practitioners, various organizations, including ICM, work tirelessly to untangle the challenges of migration and provide robust evidence and research that guide policy making. It brings out the need for migration network that will act as source of ideas, tools, reliable data, information, analysis, and policy guidance on migration issues, can elevate and enhance research and studies in the field of migration by encouraging more academically rich and relevant work. As the Ministry of External Affairs think tank on matters relating to international migration, ICM is well poised to leverage its position and vast network of professionals and institutions associated with ICM in various capacities. Since 2008, ICM has worked with various stakeholders to drive empirical, analytical, and policy-related research on migration with focus on India, enhance capacities, and pilot good practices in international migration and its governance. ICM has provided a multitude of stakeholders nationwide with a platform for timely debates on full range of migration issues, while retaining strong linkages with other overlapping policy domains through its panel discussions, consultations workshops, and stakeholders meetings. Though we have been doing in-person meetings, but in the whole 2020, we have to shift to webinars, including today's one. ICM, in developing this knowledge network, will initiate, contribute, and support a common platform where detailed analysis on core areas of international migration can be discussed. Dialogues can be initiated in areas of labor supply gaps, trends, and dynamics of international labor market, international good practices concerning safety and welfare of immigrant workers, diaspora remittances, student mobility and development, etc. This is no small challenge. We must work together to ensure the immediate impacts of pandemic are mitigated as far as possible, while ensuring that we do not lose sight of our longer-term goals, notably the achievement of sustainable development goals. This year started with the decade of action, and we must make sure it does not become a decade of distraction and subsequent inaction. Of course, every year comes to us with challenges and joys. Of course, the joys are to serve the people, but challenges are to become stronger. I think 2020 is one of the challenging years, but we have overcome, and of course we'll we will face with more confidence in the coming years, whatever the challenges come in future, but we'll work for the better society, better development of the country. With the objective of being a mutually beneficial existence in linking academia, international organization for policymakers, and also widen the research collaboration of ICM in India, I'm happy to see that relevant stakeholders and experts gathered here today. It is my hope that this stakeholders consultation will have the effect of enhancing our knowledge on the current gaps, and we will have identified practices, lessons learned, recommendations for building a network of professionals, organizations working on important issue of international migration from India. This is an extremely large undertaking, but vitally important one. And I look forward to hearing all of your deliberations. I welcome you all to this discussion and hope today's meeting will stimulate constructive discussions. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for those initial remarks. I will now give the floor to Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, who is a distinguished fellow at the Gateway House. He is a member of CII's two important bodies, which is the International Trade Policy Council and Africa Committee. He has served of FICCI's core group of experts on BIMSTEC and continues to head its task force. He's also a founding member of Kalinga International Foundation. Among the many things that Ambassador Bhatia does is also writing regular articles in various newspapers. So I look forward to Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia moderating today's discussion. Over to you, sir. So I think you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Surabhi, for reminding me. This is typical. You assume that people are just beginning to listen to you. Thank you so much for inviting me and for introducing me. Thank you very much, Abhagani Ramu. I remember to have met you in Bangkok, and great to meet you again here today virtually. I think we are among a very esteemed group of experts, and the challenge thrown by ICM is also quite both daunting and interesting. I don't have to repeat any of the points which the Joint Secretary has very astutely made. All that I can say is that I'm somewhat overwhelmed by the lineup of the experts who have devoted whole lifetime studying the subject of diaspora and migration. I've been studying other things, but I can say that I did amass a great deal of practical experience in terms of dealing with the diaspora issues in very many parts of the world. I had the chance to work in a lot of countries where there are big Indian diasporic communities, and therefore the whole story of migration and what happens when a person arrives in a new society takes place has been quite familiar story. But I think today we are not into either the history of migration or necessarily the mix of the causes of economics, sociology, psychology, culture, wanderlust, and the rest of it all, which triggers migration. I think we have to adopt a very practical approach today. And I would like to try to define it. And if I have the understanding and support of our experts, then we can proceed from there. This is, first of all, is not a panel discussion. So I will not be inviting experts to make presentation for 10 or 15 minutes and like an anxious chair, looking at the watch more than listening to them. That will not be the attempt. This is brainstorming. This is where I think the moderator has been asked to hold, conversations with the four top experts, and we would do this for about 40 minutes. and then we would try together to engage with the audience as well. Now, what is the purpose? As far as I can see, as I heard Ramu very clearly, I think we know that a great deal of research has been taking place in India on the subject of migration. Researchers in India are also fully aware of research that is taking place outside. The issue is whether it is possible to upgrade and enrich this research, and whether this can be made more policy-oriented research. That is, not all research has to be policy-oriented, but can researchers respond to the need of the authorities for the kind of research they need for developing new, more appropriate policies for the challenges that face the country in 21st century. I think this is the one fundamental issue. So under that cluster, we will need to really think of responding as to how the entire quality and scope of research can be looked at. The second point very much to my mind is to go into very clearly into the international and national scenario. All the facts and figures have been quoted, which essentially point out that India in the next decade or more will remain the surplus country, the source country of migrants. And there will be a number of developed countries, maybe other societies as well, where there would be a deficit of labor. And therefore, obviously, the government wants whether those deficits, those gaps can be leveraged for the interests of Indians, because clearly, to the extent migration is an economic activity, it will very much help if we could leverage those gaps. So in a way, we need to look at migration very much in the international context. And the third, which is the most fundamental and the immediate goal of this, is to understand whether we need a national network of on migration, national network of scholars and centers and studies centers, institutions, etc. Whether we could gather together people and institutions who could be consulted from time to time by ICM and by the authorities, and thereby a kind of interface that could be created. So the idea of network, we need to understand whether we really need the network. If yes, then what kind of a network? Should it be a formal setup? Should it be a quasi-formal setup? Should it be a informal setup? And if we really need it, then what sort of role and responsibilities and duties we could expect to give to it? This is largely the outline as I see it, but of course this is not rigid, and we will try to develop it as we go along, because we are dealing with experts and they would really tell us as to how very many angles need to be covered here. So with this brief outline, let me start off with Professor Rajan. I did see him almost the first person here, and I know that he has been introduced, but he is very much a respected peer among us all. He is from Hyderabad, where he's the founding director of the city.
Trivandrum.
Sorry, Trivandrum. Sorry, I got Trivandrum. Very much Trivandrum. So in that sense, as the professor at the Center for Development Studies, I would very much like you to perhaps tackle first two issues, because they are really quite interconnected in terms of the importance of migration and in terms of the present gaps and the challenges that India faces. Perhaps you'll be good enough to speak for a while, and then we can take it forward.
Thank you, Ambassador Rajiv. I think I just want to probably start asking one big question. Do we really need a network? I think that is something probably I would like the other members also to talk. Do we need a network? If there is a network is required, it should be done by the, say, ICM or the government, or it should be outside the government. That's something we should look at it, because we have a lot of associations running in this country. For example, you have economic association, sociological association, because migration is highly interdisciplinary. It is not belong to any subject, either economics or demography or sociology. It's everybody now, especially among the COVID-19, we have seen that many people are participating in the migration.
Professor Rajan, I request your cooperation. That issue very much will be discussed. I want to assure you that is the issue number 3. Because once we go into that, then the whole thing will become a little intricate. You are here as the national expert on migration. I don't want you to confine yourself to just one part. So kindly do share your views as to how you look at the present future of migration and how India can leverage or benefit from the perceived gaps in the international market. I think let us first focus a little bit on the heart of the matter.
Okay. Then I will do that. So I think I can pick up from the point which you left, basically that India will continue to be the leader in sending more people. I think there is no doubt about that. We have a very huge demographic dividend. I think we know that we have a huge demographic dividend. And in addition to that, I think COVID-19 is going to create new opportunities for migration. I think sometimes people say COVID-19 is going to end migration. I think it is going to create new opportunities, new migration corridors, which probably India can explore, like Africa and other countries, even Europe. We have very little people. So automatically the future of Indian migration is going to be very high peak after the post-COVID-19. With skills, unskilled, semi-skilled, I think we can be present in almost all the 200 plus countries with the maximum numbers. I think India can be the only country with also not just unskilled like some other countries. We have both skilled, semi-skilled, unskilled. In all categories we have. If you want a plumber, you can get from India. You want a high-trained nurse, you can get from India. India is in a right place. And in added to that, India is currently the #1 in terms of remittances. That's also we should keep in mind, because the migrants send remittances. It's not that diaspora sends remittances. So I think that context, we have to continue to work on migration, and we have to have more people getting into for migration research. I think as long as I am located in Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum, for over the last probably 3 decades now, we were running many programs to engage migration scholars. I think that is something, probably something we should talk about that, because we were trying to put what we call them evidence-based policy, because that is something very important for policymakers, because you can't have a policy without evidence. And the evidence is produced, for example, through the survey which we do for so many years now, called Kerala Migration Survey. And in fact, that I'm proposing that there should be done at the all India level, because the Kerala model of migration survey is being replicated in Punjab, replicated in Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, and also in Goa. So it can be replicated, so we know that what type of people are leaving, because right now we have very little statistics about migrants. I think the database, we are very weak with the data, because we get a very little data from the ECR data statistics. Otherwise, today we have some number, even floating number, sometimes even not even estimate. We have guesstimates. I think we have to put the number. We have put the number somewhere. From there, we can start where we can send. I'm going to stop here. Maybe we'll pick it up a little later.
No, you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right about the growing importance and also the need of data. I'll even now ask you one more brief question, and then I'll move on to the next expert. It's good to know that you are suggesting that there would be very significant gaps in the international market, and India would be in a good position to fulfill them or bridge them. Is it possible for you to indicate, on the basis of your research as to where exactly these gaps, the needs for Indian workers would emerge in terms of either regions or in terms of countries, just to specify it a bit more briefly?
Yeah, I think our presence is more in the Gulf now. I think COVID-19, we should go beyond Gulf. I think that is what I am telling to the Kerala government. We have to go beyond Gulf, maybe to Europe, which is also aging population. So Europe, and then get into probably to African region, because I can see Chinese are really pushing their people into African countries. So I think India can work closely with the ambassadors, and then we can move that. I think these are the two regions we can talk about, beyond Gulf and then probably to Africa and Europe.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate that. Dr. Meera Sethi, wonderful to have you on the panel. We are very much aware of your long practical experience. You have served as the Director General Special Envoy, Director General of the United Nations International Organization for Migration. So with your long diplomatic and administrative experience, would you kindly share with us first the thoughts or perspectives on the first two issues? The importance and trends and how you look at the market, and specifically from the Indian perspective, how does the scenario of migration, international migration, look to us? Unmute, yeah, unmute, please.
To unmute me?
Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me, please?
Yes.
All right. It's very interesting. I'm sorry, there's some network problem at my end because I did lose some of your text, but I think I've got the key message. I think I'd like to point out at the outset that this initiative of ICM and MEA comes at a very timely moment, especially when the countries are now at the moment trying to embark on setting up a UN migration network. And of course, India is also one of the countries that is part of this global process. So I think, and so there is the spirit of collaboration, partnership, which is already coming into being at the global level. And one of the reasons that this has become very important is because structures of agencies are too heavy, too centralized in order to bring in quick decisions, in order to bring in. So when I looked at the set of questions, I was very pleased. And I felt immediately it was very obvious to me, given my collaboration with ICM over the last several years in various contexts, whether it's implementation of projects, whether it's webinars, that the time was right and ripe for ICM now to take on this process. Now, yes, Professor Rajan has asked, should the government be involved? It's very interesting if you note that most of the networks.
Excuse me, I think maybe it was the lack of connectivity. I think we are still on those first two issues. We will come to the third main issue, which is on the network itself in a very short while. But given your very interesting scholarship, are you, let me ask a direct question. Are you very clear, Madam, that the importance of migration will not merely stay but grow, and therefore it would create opportunities, new opportunities for a country like India? Is that your impression? And how do you look at the state of research in India on the migration issues? I think that is what we need briefly, and then we move on to. We'll come to that other issue very quickly.
Yes, I'm sorry, there's also a problem of network. I do believe that the phenomenon of migration is here to stay, and India has a major role and is a key partner in this whole issue of migration. Given the numbers where India is concerned, also being a source country, being the receiver of remittances, and given the kind of policies that India has already embarked on at the international level, migration is a subject and is going to be a game changer given the current scenario of COVID. And so this is your first question that you asked me. Secondly, the quality of research definitely needs a lot of work. Based on my research over the last few years, there is a disconnect between what's going on internally and what's going on internationally. we have different data, we have different methodologies being used by researchers and practitioners when it comes to international migration or internal migration. And different approaches are being used. So, and a lot of the research has a disconnect. So I do believe that if ICM and if this network and if there's a consensus on this, then policy guidance and research should be amongst the key objectives.
Thank you very much.
Where,
that's very useful. Yeah, that's very useful. Just a quick follow-up question. If there is such a big disconnect in research internally and internationally, would you be in a position to suggest where are the gaps as far as Indian research is concerned on this issue? Which are the facets or specific questions on which Indian researchers need to focus more in future, looking at the trends in the market and so on?
I think the different approaches, the different models being used internally as well as internationally, the two are not speaking to each other. And there are very few, a very small percentage of researchers who are really trying to bring and integrate all these approaches together. So that's one issue here. And the second is that the impact analysis of policies, we feel that that's an area that really needs to move forward. Also, the interstate dimension in terms of the different researchers, different practices, how is this being collated together and consolidated and then contributing to policy? So evidence-based policy and...
Thank you very much. I think that's a very, the very good set of points you have made. But I'm completely convinced about, if research is largely confined to internal context, then obviously it should be looked at and it should be connected or integrated to the international context. I think this is a given thing. Professor Bhatt, may I come to you now? Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So you are the one originally from Hyderabad and you're back there, as you were explaining to me. Yeah,
that's right.
So you have been following the debate. I don't have to summarize again, just for the sake of time.
Sure.
So the first two issues in terms of how you look at the trends out in the community, out in the market, so to say, and how you assess the quality and the entire breadth of research in India on these issues. Please share your views on this.
One of the points which has been made by an earlier speaker is that we don't have enough data collected from various surveys as to the availability of the kind of resources who would be thinking of migrating. The migration survey that Iruday Rajan was mentioning, I think that is one thing which need to be really pushed. It has been done in a couple of states, but need to be done on the whole country basis. That's one. So that we realize now the kind of people available there, the level of migrants, willing migrants who are available there, and then you can put them into necessary, sometimes skilling, etc. ICM has taken a lot of efforts to the skill development of some of the prospective migrants under some Prime Minister's scheme or something like that. I remember one of my students was working there earlier. So in order to channelize this, because certainly there is going to be a huge gap to be filled, and Indian workforce will be the one most suitable. And I'm sure people will be also looking forward because they have certain capabilities which has been proved. And in order to tap that market, we need to prepare our back home here as many migrants coming up. 56 million it is mentioned there, and 56 million is a fairly huge crowd. And where are they, and what are the skills they have? This is a question that we need to develop. And I think by this information, we can also try to see what kind of skills are needed at the other end. What kind of job orientation is there at the other end? In the Gulf countries, we know what kind of jobs are needed now. It's a very clear pattern which has emerged, and there are people who are ready to go there. And we have specifically some of the states who have developed this scheme of connecting to the Gulf countries. Kerala is one of them, and then of course Andhra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, some of the southern states and the UP. Many states have now the knowledge in terms of how to connect with each other, the linkage possible. But that has to come up in other locations also where there are more labor available. You have a huge force in Assam, in Bihar, and so on. The number of people who are migrating out is much limited there compared to the states in the South India. So they could also be provided necessary information, skills, and get them ready. We have to prepare this huge workforce as it has been projected. So the scope is quite a bit, and we have to be prepared for this. And I think no other organization can centrally coordinate this kind of a project other than ICM. This is where I see the centrality of the role of ICM. Maybe later answering first.
We will come to that. We'll come to that because we can see that there would be some diversity of views, which is always very welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think let me move now to Neha ji and ask you specifically. I guess we all agree that migration is important and it would grow in importance. And some of the points which have been made by the panelists earlier, ICM tried to suggest a set of specific topics for discussion or for actually further research in the future, because they seem to feel that these are the areas in which there's not sufficient research happening, and they call them as supply gaps, other dynamics in labor market, student mobility, diaspora issues, the welfare issues of migrants, and there would be many more. So I'm particularly interested in your idea, of course, broadly, whether you feel migration needs greater attention, and if so, then specifically which areas where we need to focus by way of research in future.
Thank you. Let me start by congratulating ICM for really taking this initiative to hold the stakeholder meeting on really, I think, a very timely, initiative to set up this migration network. And I would like to share that I think there's no better institution than the ICM, which is poised in such a way to really take this forward. And I would like to actually say that in terms of existing research on migration, of course, I think there are many more scholars who are working on it, and I'm an exalted company at this panel itself, because I think some of the pioneers of migration research are present here. But I think this sharing of information is really critical. And I think while diaspora studies has really shown us the way, I do agree that there are many areas in which we do need a more concerted discussion on, of course, research outputs, such as looking at migration patterns from a gender lens, looking at the different sort of recruitment pathways that have emerged, looking at new markets, but at the same time, to really do so in a way that would inform policymaking. And I understand, Ambassador, that's one of the successive questions or the following questions that you would have, which is to say that, can research really inform policy making? And I would like to say that actually research is critical to really build robust policies on the basis of. And such a network would really facilitate such a conversation. And let me also please, take this opportunity to say why I think ICM is really poised to do this. Because as we have seen, I think in the last few months, and as Mr. Abak,
if you allow me, I have to be fair to everybody. I'm coming to that aspect right away. I've understood your position. I very much appreciate and commend your conviction that policy needs research. And I think, no matter what our own personal position may be for any bureaucratic or governmental initiative, we should have no difficulty in appreciating that this platform itself, where we are discussing the current state of research, whether we need it, and if so, in what fashion we can do it in a collegiate manner. This shows that policymaker is hungry for evidence-based research. It is not that they are saying that there is no research going on. Research is going on. But there is academic research and there is policy guiding research. And I think while both are required, the country needs both, the society needs both. But here we need to focus on that specific realm. So we will come to that. I think I've understood very clearly that this was the peripheral matter. I think let us move to the core. On the peripheral, let me just make a point, which is that clearly when experts like all of us sit down, only then we are in the best position to exercise our judgment as to how good is our research and where the gaps are. So in a way, we are trying to do that. But let us move to the central question. Do we need a network, as Professor Rajan said right at the beginning? And if we do, should it be from the academic sector on its own, or the initiative can be taken by a body such as ICM with very clear, transparent, and positive intentions? But I will not preempt, and I will start straight away come to Professor Rajan. I'm sorry I had to interrupt you earlier, but now this is the time for you to kindly share your views.
Thank you, Ambassador Rajiv. I think when I started up, I think that we need migration network. I don't think there is no doubt about that, because we have scholars, because I can see already even this, we are 36 participants are attending this particular meeting. I think most of them are scholars and they have done not only research, they have known maybe another 10 scholars. That means we are talking about something like 300 scholars already present there. So I think the network is very, very important, but what role ICM can play, because that is something very, very important. Because as I know ICM, because I did work with the MOEA for almost 10 years with them, and plus MEA project. And also I know ICM from the beginning. I think ICM is right now, it is a very small place. If you want to run this network, you have to expand your staff. Because when I did a study in Qatar, when I go to the ambassador's office, there are only 5-10 people are working there, but the number of workers, where the staff is always very less. You have a scarcity of staff in many of the Indian embassies. So similarly, when you talk about workers, because I know you have so many people in that. Similarly, ICM has very limited staff unless you have to expand the staff of the ICM itself to handle. Because this is a big handling work, running a network and getting research done, getting organizing meeting, even annual global meeting, something like that. It's difficult for the ICM to do probably, unless ICM want to make some changes in their whole framework. The second point is that, for example, CDS, where I right now there, for a few months, the important is that we were running, for example, migration training program. We have done 12 training program in India, which was funded by the MOEA earlier. So we have scholars, both attended the program and both were faculty in the program. So we have a network of close to 300 to 350 scholars, which is the list is with us, who are young, middle, and senior. Like you can see, for example, I can see Professor Bharat Katria. He came here to teach our students. So we have a group of around 300 to 350 people already in our network, mostly students working on migration. I can see many of them I have seen most of them probably attended either the program or come to CDS. So maybe an institute with the support of the government, something we should think of. Then probably there is a research wing and there is an administrative wing. So there is some type of partnership. And then we can do, for example, as rightly said by Professor Bhatt, if you are running for a Kerala model of survey in other part of the states, I know that every state has now capability to run the survey. Every state, because I know even UP, there are people, even Rajasthan, there are people. So how to organize them? Probably ICM can organize that with the support of, maybe some other entity. So we have to discuss more on that. But I do agree We have a migration scholars group. We already have it with us. And similarly, every place will have, JNU will have, Tata Institute will have, every institute will have a group of scholars who are working with them, and we can combine them. You will have at least, I'm sure, 500 people in this country might be working on migration right now. At least 500 people.
Thank you. I think you have made your position clear, saying that network is required. The only issue is whether it should be set up by some other body or authority, or whether ICM can do it, in which case ICM has to be a much bigger body. But there arises even a finer question, which is network by definition is not an institution, at least not necessarily. Network really is a network of scholars and institutes which already exist.
Absolutely.
And it is trying to arrange interface among them through a kind of a forum or a platform. It will probably need a few people to run it, but it would not create an institution. On the other hand, you can have a full-fledged institutional network. So let me go to Dr. Sethi and see if she has any views on this particular aspect of our discussion now.
I think there's one key point. If you look at the whole subject of migration, it's always been a very piecemeal approach. And it's given the multi-sectoral nature of the subject, who is best placed to pull the various partners together is a question that I'd like to ask over here. And I think when you look at what has already happened on the ground, let's look at the UNESCO initiative on internal migration, which was a network of scholars, practitioners, came up with few works. But again, certain partners did not have a voice. So bringing in a balanced approach, having government, having academics and scholars, as well as practitioners and international national organizations, in my view, ICM does have the capacity or has the power in a way to pull these partners together. Having a balanced approach and not being tilting towards only academics and overlooking perhaps the civil society or overlooking a certain body of vested stakeholders would again then be a gap. And what is really critical is that when you look at the GFMD, just to give you as an example, it took them 9 years to bring in the business, the private sector together. ICM in its last few activities has shown us that the private sector also has the capacity to come in and work closely with the ICM, whether we have the private sector recruitment agents or other partners. Similarly, civil society was kept outside, but we've also had some very good associations, civil society members who have contributed to the dialogue. So I do believe that the ICM can create the synergies, can also build in the trust of various partners, which is always lacking. And then we do not have government support in a large amount of the networks that are already existing. So if we have a commitment from the government to actually take this forward, which I see another plus and added value to this whole network issue.
Okay, thank you. I think that we are reaching somewhere, and I think as soon as I've run through the experts and before I go to the audience, I really need to come to Joint Secretary Mr. Ramu and also Surabhi, because I've been a little bit handicapped. I frankly do not know what the thinking of the ICM and Ministry of External Affairs is on this. But it's very clear, I think, that there has to be some role for ICM. I mean, there is no doubt on that. But it is about the nature of that role that we would have to be clearer. But we'll come to that. Let us first hear Professor Bhatt. What do you feel about this issue, Professor?
I think I wouldn't like to repeat what Meeraji said. I fully agree with what she says. And I would only add a little more, because the kind of migrants we are talking about is not one variety. One is they're at different layers, right from the labor force. I've been first mentioning about the labor force, where you have to train them from according to the need-based requirement at the other end in other countries. There are others who are in skill level, highly skilled and so on, for whom I think they don't need any hand holding, because they carry on their migration on their own, because they know where to go and how to go out, including the students. So essentially, we have to aim at the lower level working labor, who often, in the case of the Middle East, they can't go with their families, they go alone. And it are these kind of migrants who need perhaps the maximum support from wherever the state maybe, or from any organization. So ICM has to take care of it. Yeah.
Of clarification.
Yeah.
There is one thing which is training activity. That is done by a number of institutions as far as I can see. The network that we are talking about, I think, is essentially research network, isn't it?
Yeah.
And therefore, does training come into that?
Yeah. No, what I'm trying to come up is you have different kinds of migrants going. So we have the scholars who are working different layers. I carry out studies on diaspora, and my main target is to look at those diaspora people who have lost link with India, who have migrated 150, 200 years ago. So my focus is different. My training, my inputs, or whatever is different. So you have to have the network of scholars who are working in different domains of migration, in sense, different levels of migrants who are traveling. So the real situation is that you will understand the problematics of these and monitor the migration. I see one of the important roles of the ICM could be monitoring in terms of how these services are provided, how data is generated on different levels of migration, and what are their needs, how can we cope up with it to make migrant a very smooth travel to the destination. So I think we have scholars who are experts in different domains. Now, I saw Professor Binod Khadria. Now, he has worked extensively.
I have got your main point. I think we will come to that. Let us just quickly go to Dr. Neha. Yeah, I'll just go to Dr. Neha if you don't mind, Professor Bhatt. Dr. Neha,
so
could you?
Yeah,
Professor Bhatt. Yeah, I followed. Thank you very much. Neha ji, आप बताएं, how do you feel about? Is it first probably logical to define the role of the network before we even begin to discuss the role of ICM? Do you feel that would be the correct sequence?
Ambassador Bhatia, I think I would echo Professor Bhatt's sentiments here and say that, there are so many different areas that need research and need to really then inform policy building. Perhaps it would be interesting to really have a registration of interested scholars that the ICM can facilitate to then identify certain thematics and areas which can feed into policy making, which can then be coordinated. And I'm saying this because it is absolutely essential, I feel, to have research networks that are linked to the government. I mean, there are research networks that exist and very good ones at that. But the entire process or the discussions in these research networks do cater to an academic discourse much more than to policy making. So the role that ICM plays then becomes very critical to then create that channel where this research is not just limited to an academic exercise, but can then feed into effective policy making. If I may take half a minute to give you a very good example that I thought, the researcher's hat as well as a policy practitioner's hat now for many years. And in fact, before I was working with the ILO, I've also worked with the Ministry of External Affairs, with Professor Rajan on trying to look at what a really exhaustive pre-departure training manual could be like. Now, to really do this, I think it requires research acumen to be able to pull out and cull out what are the important things that migrants need to know, as well as engage with the government on what are the policy issues, what are the kind of directives in place that migrants also need to be aware of. So that combination of factors can only happen if there is a dialogue between researchers as well as policy practitioners. And again, I feel government-led network where institutional partners can definitely be brought on board, as well as individual partners can be brought on board, would really be the way forward. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think the idea that seems to be emerging is that the network is required. It's required to make sure that research is supportive of policy and the policy needs. Network will have to be essentially a collaborative enterprise between the various research institutes and scholars on the one hand, and ICM on the other hand. Specifically, what would be the roles and responsibilities of the two institutions, that is the various cluster of bodies which already exist, and ICM on the other? That is something we will need to focus on a bit more closely. But at this stage, I want to find out if Surabhi or Ramu would like to join us and express any views informally, because I'm sure they have not yet developed probably formally their position. If they wish to join, this is a good time. Otherwise, I'll go to the participants.
Sir, I would like to join, and am I audible
Welcome.
to you?
Yes, most welcome.
First of all, thank you very much for conducting this session in a much more participatory and thought-provoking way, rather than the panel discussion of 10 minutes presentation and going around. I think this made the discussion more interesting. So before moving on, let me congratulate on this point. But what I understand from hearing all the four panelists, basically there is a consensus. I think there is a need for having a network. What kind of network details can be looked into later, but generally there is a consensus. And most of the participants said that ICM is being in a central position and connected with the ministry, and also ministry is a huge network of protector of immigrants and embassies taking the welfare of migrants. Basically, ministry's role comes from the ensuring that they are trained and they are not going into the wrong hands. So there is a whole setup of protecting them and with the Protector General of Immigrants, and post-arrival training, pre-departure training, the protection, ensuring that they are protected, and when they arrive in the destination country, post-arrival training, and taking care of them through Indian welfare, Indian Community Welfare Fund. So it is a whole package what ministry does. But what ICM is a window of ministry with respect to migration policy. So as the two divisions, Overseas Indian Affairs Division 1 and 2 and Protector General of Immigrants, they were part of the Overseas Indian Affairs Ministry, but now they are part of ministry, but these three divisions are behind ICM to support them. To the question of Mr. Professor Irudaya Rajan, whether the ICM is good enough, the present staff set comparing to, like he compared with the embassies where the ambassador and couple of people are there. In the similar way, whether ICM is we are having enough wherewithal to play a central role for this network. So one point which Ambassador Bhatia made it very clear is that we need not have a big organization for having such network. Network is only a connection of various organizations working all over India. So that doesn't necessitate a central organization which is playing the central role need to be very big. But at the same time, let me assure you that ICM is a part of research orientation of ministry, but the administrative part is also part in the part of ministry which is backing ICM. As I said, that ICM is a window, but the Overseas Indian Affairs Ministry, as well ministry which is part of Ministry of External Affairs with three divisions is supporting ICM. So I feel that there is enough strength for ICM to play that role, but of course I will leave the idea with all the stakeholders and thinkers. But from my side, I can clarify that ICM would be in a position to play that central role, take the responsibility with the support of these 3 divisions of ministry, and of course various setup across the country, like as I said, the protector of immigrants and Indian embassies abroad to take care of post-arrival and welfare of immigrants.
Thank you very much. Very, very useful.
Sir, Surabhi, if you want, she can add something, sir.
I think so. You have put
Very
forward
useful.
our view. Am I audible, Professor Ambassador Bhatia?
Yes.
I think all the
yes,
things that I
you are.
would want to point out has already been pointed by our JS. And this exercise of stakeholder consultation is to really generate ideas that since we are at a nascent stage and to really see how we can take this initiative forward. So we really want to listen today to what everyone has to say.
Yeah. All right. All right. I think Ramu has given some very good ideas, and I see much optimism. At this stage, I think in spirit of full democracy, let us move to the audience now. We have lots of questions and comments. I will use the chair's or moderator's prerogative to, raise some of them so that at least we have a. There is one question which relates to suggesting that we can have issue-based networks that bring stakeholders to come together to provide inputs to a particular policy question. This is the idea which is coming from Sanjay. I think I do not know whether this is the one which is at the top, which is Sita, I think.
Sorry, Ambassador Bhatia, it's actually my inputs coming in. I'm Sita speaking.
Okay, you want to quickly put across your view?
Yeah, so I actually raised that because I think, as all the speakers have been saying, there are multiple areas of work and there's expertise, obviously, in different areas of work with different people. Creating a network also means that in some ways there can be a limitation. But if it's an issue-based network that actually addresses a particular question or a particular area, then what happens is I think it really allows for ICM to play the facilitator role and bring experts in that area together. And then once some of those questions have been answered or there's more understanding built in, then we can move on from there. So I think ICM can remain central and play that facilitator role. And then organizations, I'm from the ILO, by the way, and therefore organizations like ours can actually provide some of that support in terms of, also perhaps linking up some of our research or some of our ongoing groundwork and bringing inputs, but also, just bringing in a number of people who can work on that question and then leave it. And that in parallel, there could be other groups working or, it's just a way of bringing in, I think, more expertise, but also allowing ICM to be centrally positioned in taking those inputs.
Okay.
So that was.
Thank you very much. Of course, probably you don't necessarily mean that there should be more than one network. It's possible that one research network can play multiple roles and perform multiple activities going subject-wise, but that is for further discussion and clarification. There is one question that seems to be coming here is from Partha Mukhopadhyay. Is he here? Can you hear me? He's talking something about aging populations and the need for migrant workers. Can you please speak briefly and tell us what is your suggestion?
Actually, I was looking at 3 quick things. First, and thank you for having me here. First, as I said, the demand story is quite natural, and we would need to see which countries are using migrant workers to meet care work. For example, Japan has issues with using migrant workers for that purpose, and which countries are not. And that sort of goes back to what Professor Rajan's issues were there. But one of the main issues I would like to flag is the fact that Indians remit a lot of money home and have a reputation for returning at the conclusion of their tenure essentially makes them attractive migrants for other countries because they're clearly non-immigrants rather than being immigrants. And obviously, there will be some immigration as a result of that. But the first issue is, I think, emphasizing the fact that a lot of the Indians who do go abroad actually return home, I think is an important part of the valuation of Indian labor abroad. That's one of the issues that I would like to flag. The second is, I think, a key gap in our understanding. My own work has largely been on internal migration. A key gap in our understanding is the linkage between the two in terms of the supply as to where exactly these migrants are coming from and the channels of information that sort of drive these supplies. And is it the extent to which you need to see the internal migration as a step migration to an international migration, vis-a-vis essentially direct channels between small towns and villages and destination countries, which also exist through a variety of intermediaries. So understanding the essential link of internal migration and international migration, understanding the expansion of those channels of information, I think is an important part of the story. And
Thank
finally,
you. Thank you very much.
Yes, finally, if I may finish, the issue is one of, I think the focus so far has been on increasing supply and on the conditions of work and life of migrants in the destination countries. However, from your initial remarks, it seems that the government is also interested in both migration as being absorbing of surplus labor as well as remittance inflows. And we really, I think the work by Devesh and others in this, and given the kind of statistics we have, we don't really fully understand the remittance inflows, the spatial ways where they're going, and the manner in which international remittances are used and in what form. And therefore, the impact of migration on the domestic economy here is something that is, I think, relatively poorly understood. I think Professor Rajan has done considerable work on that in the context of Kerala, but I think in other places that's relatively poorly understood, and this is another area perhaps we could do with some focus. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for very comprehensive response there. I would like to pick up one more. This is coming from Dr. K.B. Swami. Is he here? Dr. K.B. Swami. He's suggesting to organize awareness and promotion programs on overseas migration.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yes. Thank you, Rajuji. My point is very clear. The migration network ultimately should help the migrant. The migrant may be intending migrant or returning migrant or intentional migrant, whatever it may be. So the present system is not having facilitation centers or migration centers across India. This is making the people to take sometimes not well informed decisions. Maybe they are taking a rash decision, influenced decision, or misinformation, or not proper counseling is not given. Proper awareness may not be there. By the time they realize it, it might be too late. They have gone to the other country and they are facing the issues there. And this I have seen in my 15 years of service. They wanted to come back, but because of some document issue and other issues, they could not. So I feel that whatever the migrant network we are proposing, it should cater to the needs of migrants first.
I think
that's
I'll
where we said
I think there is a little bit of a communication gap here. dear friend, with deep respect, I do appreciate that migrants need help. But the idea under discussion is something very different. It is the network of researchers and research institutions that we are talking about. This
Yes,
work will also help with
exactly, sir.
migrants, but on a
Exactly.
long-term basis. Yeah, they cannot be.
Yes, sir.
This
Exactly.
network cannot be a facilitation center.
Yes, sir. Like no, whatever the research network that we are talking about, ultimately the information should reach the migrant. That's my idea is, which is lacking. So there, what I suggest is simple. Now the government of India has come out with a social security code 2020. And it has converted all the employment exchanges existing in India as career centers, where career counseling, advocacy, and information is given. So my suggestion is that why can't we bring all the career centers, which are employment exchanges, now under the network of this proposed migration network centers? That's it. Thank you.
Can I
Thank
share
you
my
very
view,
much.
sir? Can I say something? I'm Vinod Kadria.
All right, you're welcome.
Yeah, I'll be
Briefly,
very
please.
brief, sir. I think
I want to go back to the panel.
yeah, I'll be very brief and to the point. And thank you for my thanks to my colleagues Hirudaya Rajan and Professor Bhatt for mentioning my work. I have been at JNU. I'll come to that at the end while talking about the network. But the first 2 points that you have mentioned about policy-oriented research and the international context, I think we need not go into the nitty-gritties of each and every aspect of migration here in terms of discussion here. But the basic focus in terms of priorities in policy-oriented research, we should not look at India, our country, only as a country of origin. It is also a country of destination. We do have large number of migrants from neighboring countries in our territory, and that has to be addressed. Those are also the migrants. In fact, Bangladesh, India is the world's one of the second largest bilateral migration corridor after Mexico, United States. So that also needs to be addressed, and that's why we have so much of problems about migration that we have not even touched. So I would say that to have a balanced migration policy, we need to have research both on migration, emigration, and immigration. To be very brief. On second point about internationalization or international context, when we think of policy, we must be conscious that we cannot act in autarky. We are in a multilateral world. We are these things, the multilateral negotiations take place in terms of, because we are one side, we are origin country and somebody else is a destination country and vice versa. So it has to be in tandem. It has to be either bilateral or multilateral. But I would stick my neck out to say even unilateral. India can take lead and create an example of a policy that can be emulated by other countries. That also needs research, and that can be undertaken by this network, by ICM, by universities, by scholars, and so on. Finally, I would say about the network, and I had the privilege of being connected with ICM right from its birth, even its in earlier form through Moya, to bring a project in Jawaharlal Nehru University in 2008, and had a very big international conference with partners from even from governments, from European governments, and so on. That was a great learning experience. And from that point onwards, ICM actually grew. The name ICM was given later on, and I think it has lots of potentials to actually feed into this network. I think it's the right moment. The maturity has come, and we need to think out of the box. I am member of very large networks. World's largest network is Metropolis International. I'm a member of the International Steering Committee for more than 14 years. We also now have a subsidiary called Metropolis Asia. I'm the South Asia chair for that. And I think there is great potentials to have networking amongst networks. So if we have an Indian network with the focal point in the hands of the ICM, then perhaps it would be a win-win situation that we can get. I'll stop right here.
Thank you.
So that
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very useful.
Sir,
I think,
may
dear
I make
friends,
a
we have
point?
got a good. This is Dr. Sasi Kumar. All right,
Yes.
you will be the last one, and a quick one, please.
Thank you very much, sir. It's really a privilege to listen to you. And you have very clearly articulated the way we should be thinking about these networks at 3 stages. One, in terms of the importance of migration, particularly the contemporary or the future patterns of migration. That's going to change. I don't want to deliberate on that much, but it is going to definitely change in the post-COVID situation. Second, how far the research can contribute to the understanding of it. In the context of India, yes, research is happening, but it is little scattered. As a consequence of which, from there, we draw to the network. So I think there's a very strong connect between the importance of migration, number one, the kind of research that we should be thinking about, number two, and then the most important is the connect of research with the policy. What is needed in the country today? A country with such tremendous potential and tremendous inflow of remittances, massive skills, huge impacts. We have not positioned international migration at the center of public policy discourses. And that is what a network should be able to do. We should be able to position, and that is where the connect between ICM. I'm so delighted, sir. In the last 1 year, I've been with the National Labour Institute. I have known ICM and other scholars for a long time, but it's only very recently that we have had a consistent dialogue on migration. That itself is very important. Consistent dialogue. We never had. The ICM has brought us together. That is the starting point. It's a wonderful opportunity for ICM to create this network. Network of not only institutions, not only individuals, even civil society organizations concerned with international organizations. And also, like you know, sir, CII, FICCI, these organizations have an international migration wing within them. And they are looking forward to more and more collaboration with research. We need to position this network and connect these people. And as the Joint Secretary rightly said, we don't need a physical space. Network is all about technology now. It's all about technology. I mean, you're getting people connected. It's not that we are going to run from one place to another holding a project. It's not like that. Network is all about sharing of information, sharing of content, sharing of policy ideas. That is network. And I think there's a tremendous need for creating an international migration network. I know what Partha said, there's a connect between internal and international, but if you try to link to internal migration, the issues might become too complex. Yes, there is a connect to understand, but then these are all research that can form. And there are several benefits that can emanate from such a network. A number of benefits can emanate. Sharing of information, sharing of data.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your passion. I think we are reaching the stage where I need to go back to the experts who are there on the panel, and I really want to request them to gather their final thoughts. And in order to trigger that, let me just make 2 or 3 comments. I think there is definitely expending clarity on a number of issues that we tried to identify, which is based on the concept note done by ICM. So if anybody needs to be complimented, it is undoubtedly ICM. I think what is emerging is that migration is already important. It is going to be more important for the country. And therefore, our migration policy has to be dynamic. It has to be sharp. It has to be very practical. And all these qualities will only come if it is backed by far better research than the country has been able to produce so far. This is not to criticize the existing research. I mean, under the existing constraints and circumstances, and migration, which was not probably given the kind of high priority that it has been given now, it is a new situation. So we need to nevertheless improve the quality and the scope of research so that policy could be better. And in that context, what seems to be coming out fairly clearly is that the network is a good idea. but it should be a network. It should not be creating another institution, with its own president and executive committee and budget and office bearers. All that is not required. Indeed, it has to be a network of research institutions and research scholars, and it is for consideration whether some of the other concerned NGOs could be brought in or not. But I think I request panel to focus a little bit to decide what should be the role of the network. What should it do? And the second relevant issue naturally is what should then be the role of ICM? Certainly, ICM will be a friend of the network. Should it be a kind of a secretariat? Should it be an agency that will provide some additional financial assistance? Because frankly, without that, in my view, no network can really work. And ICM can also think whether this network should have, some kind of periodic meetings, issue-based meetings, theme-based meetings, maybe a broader annual review of all its work, but otherwise maybe quarterly meetings where not all members, but specific members are invited. So please look into the future, look into your knowledge, and in the next 1 or 2 minutes, each of you, if you can summarize your thoughts, I think it will help ICM a great deal. I'm going to now go the reverse order. Dr. Neha Vadavan, could you please take 2 minutes or so and express your views on this?
Thank you, Ambassador Bhatia. I think there is consensus on the need for a network that is coordinated by the ICM, and you're absolutely right. I think if ICM can really facilitate a secretariat, of course, in terms of support, there are many agencies, including the ILO, that can be approached to really provide not just financial, but also technical support in many ways. And I'm sure other UN agencies would also be very forthcoming in terms of providing support to such a network. Having said that, I just think, to go back to one of the issues that Meera had raised about the disconnect, I really feel that sometimes as researchers, one does talk about recommendations that, are pitched at the government. But I think this conversation, which can be facilitated by the ICM, will provide avenues for researchers to also understand what are the limits of sovereignty and where international organizations perhaps need to play a better role. So I think in terms of strategizing and looking at policy which caters to the future and to the welfare of migrant workers from India, I think this would be a welcome step. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Bhatt.
Thank you. I think the understanding is that, yes, the role of ICM could be quite central to coordinate and facilitate the issue-based research and also policy initiatives from there on, because up whatever is being done, the study of these migrants, etc., the research has to have an input into the policy making, which can be done with the help of all the scholars through the network. So I think it's an excellent idea. I will not repeat whatever has been said here. A number of interesting points have come up from the scholars who have been involved in migration research, and I'm sure the ICM will take it over and go ahead with the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Meera Sethi.
Yes, thank you. I think it's very clear. The ICM definitely is in a position to take the lead, to add value. Its role is also coming out very not having a big structure, is basically having a core team and the pertinent technology to take this network, which should be flexible, which should build trust, which should bring in a broad-based membership on a voluntary basis, and it should be people with the relevant technical expertise. It's not going to be a talk shop, it's a dialogue which is action-oriented and which has impact and which also contribute and impact on the policies and building more protection and welfare of migrants across the board. Thank you.
Thank you. That's clear. Professor Rajan.
Yeah, I think what I said earlier, I think the network is very, very important. There is no doubt about that. But we have to look at the ICM Secretariat, how they are going to see, how they are going to move. We have to wait and see. But the one point I would like to make is, now the migration should look at it like a pre-COVID and post-COVID. I think that is something we should look at it, because pre-COVID, COVID and post-COVID, it is going to change the whole scenario of migration. New corridors, new people, return migrant, remigrating. So I think in that context, because pre-COVID, we had migration going on, but the COVID time, really migration was brought to the limelight. It's not that migration was not there. It was there. So COVID has brought to the limelight the migration. Post-COVID, it will be a very different life together. So I think the network should play a major role to understand what is the future of migration in the post-COVID scenario. I think that is important. The network should take a lead in that.
I think that's very important. I think you have very rightly spoken about the structures and the correlationships, and I do not have much more to add to that. But now, talking from a practical point of view and looking at the research agenda for our universities and other think tanks, I think we have to recognize one thing which is very clear, that this idea that there should be Indian research in this field a little bit more outward looking, this does appeal to me. What also appeals to me is that while there is continuous appraisal of India's diaspora policy, which is one of the heart of things for the ministry and ICM, I think maybe time has come 6 years after the present government came to power to really begin to make some critical recommendations as to how the next phase of diaspora policy would develop, because there is a certain degree of, if I may say candidly, certain degree of tiredness seems to be coming in, certain degree of, deja vu kind of situation. I think there is a need, especially from our research people, to tell us clearly whether all the expectations placed on the diaspora abroad, are they all getting fulfilled, or are there more areas that we need as a government to address? So there will be a lot of very ambitious research agenda. We can think in terms of what would be happening in the next 5 or 10 years. But I really want to thank the wonderful panel. It was very supportive and cooperative, and also I think there was very good engagement with the audience. It is at this stage, I think it's proper that I again invite Joint Secretary Ramu to give his final thoughts and tell us how we can help the government and the ICM and the rest of it.
Ambassador Bhatia, hello. My extreme apologies to be intervening like this, but I just thought if you could be kind enough to give me 1 minute. I'm also part of ICM's governing council, so I thought it might be an appropriate moment for me to just interject.
2-3 minutes. Sure, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Gayatri Khan, and I'm currently working for the International Organization of Migration and have an honorary capacity there in the ICM. It was indeed a very interesting discussion on the issue of bringing a network. But what I would like to put forth is that are we at this stage still talking about issue-based migration policy, or are we going to be talking about a holistic migration policy which not only addresses or takes into account India as a sending country, but as well as a receiving country, a country of destination? And diaspora definitely is an important issue, but it is one issue amongst the entire labor migration governance issue. So if the premise of the network would be would become myopic, then I think we would lose the opportunity of providing valuable inputs to the policy framework itself, which we are wanting to shape. So a little more thought and concern needs to go into this network. It's a brilliant idea to have academic and researchers, but then if it has to be a holistic approach, we do need to have a multiple stakeholder approach as well. Private sector is as important as civil society is in identifying what the migration policy of a country should be. And we at the international level, there is a huge discussion on the whole of government approach, because if we do not see migration policy in a complete picture, where the ministries of education, ministries of labor, foreign affairs, health, all those are involved, it would again, deviate from achieving the goal or purpose that we hope our migration policy will have. So, and then what would be the connect between ICM and contribution to the changing the policies, or to bringing about or suggesting those recommendations to the government? So I think maybe another round of discussions at some point to concretize these would be interesting. Thank you for your time, and extremely apologetic for jumping in like this.
You made a very telling, thoughtful point. My own reaction, Madam, would be that it's really for ICM and MEA to take a decision on this, because those of us who are now outside the government and are in the public domain, in the research domain, we are, of course, fully aware that migration has both internal and external dimension. But somehow reading the concept note prepared by IOM, I get the impression that the focus would be largely on the external dimension, because that is what the Ministry of External Affairs handles. How the connection will be done with the various other line ministries, something that we would be very happy to learn about next time, as you said yourself. I wonder if Joint Secretary Ramu is here, or whether Surabhi would like to speak
Yes,
at
sir.
the end,
Yes,
so
sir.
that we can bring it to them. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here, sir. Can you?
Yeah. So you have the last word. I just want to say thank you to all my panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
So before responding to the points raised by Ms. Kant, let me thank her for connecting, and it's the first time I could connect with her, and it is a very important point. But as we have been discussing that, and as the agenda and the objective of ICM is more focused on international, being part of Ministry of External Affairs, but migration itself is not limited to immigration and international migration issues, but it is a holistic approach. It should be like that. But within Indian government, as most of you may be aware, that the Ministry of External Affairs, of which the erstwhile Overseas Indian Affairs Ministry became part of it, was dealing with mainly issues related to international migration. But the internal migration and the immigration issues are being handled by Ministry of Home Affairs. So it is a complete diversity of ministries dealing with issues. But of course, since the point is raised, we should look into that. And of course, many occasions there are issues come to us when the questions come to us. What about the policies on your immigration? So that needs more consultation with Ministry of Home Affairs, and of course we'll keep that in mind. I will try to make it as holistic as possible. As Ms. Khan suggested, that it needs more discussions, perhaps with more participation from other government departments and also the civil society, to make it a holistic approach. And just to mention one point which Mr. K.V. Swami mentioned about the outreach of informing the migrants about the facilities available. It is a huge task, as you mentioned. It is a big country, and the setup presently we have in terms of protect of immigrants and our PDOT centers is still limited. But we have a very big ambitious project to reach all parts of the country by expanding our PDOT centers. And we hope we'll succeed in that. But thus last 1 year or 10 months, we lost this chance to expand our area of work. But we are hopeful that we'll continue in 2021. So with these few words, I want to thank everyone once again. Thank you so much. Surabhi, would you like to say final concluding?
Sir, I would just director sir is also here, so he would do the closing remarks very briefly, and then we close. So, may I request Director Piyush Gupta to do the vote of thanks?
Good afternoon, very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can
sir,
you
you
hear
are
me?
audible. Please, yes, please go ahead.
Well, on behalf of India Center for Migration, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers for sharing with us their opinions today. I would also like to thank our moderator, Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia ji, efficiently coordinating this discourse. I must also mention sincere gratitude to Shri Abba Ramu, Joint Secretary of I1, CEO of ICM, for delivering today's noteworthy opening remarks. Indians constitute one of the largest diaspora groups worldwide, and India ranks at the top for the amount of annual foreign remittances. It is a natural corollary that research on migration in India should also keep pace with its significance for India. Hence, we visualize the idea of ICM leading an intellectual network of migration in India to drive policy relevant researchers. We hope that developing this knowledge node network will initiate, contribute, and support a common platform where detailed analysis on core areas of international migration can be discussed. This network will be a mutually beneficial exercise in linking academia, international organizations, and researchers, policymakers, and also widen the research collaboration of ICM in India. With these words, I'd like to thank once again you all for joining us today on this virtual platform and providing valuable insights and feedbacks. With these words, I wish you a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you all.
So before we close, we'll do our what we do every single time, that we'll take a virtual snap. So I would request everyone present today to kindly turn on their cameras so that we can take a virtual picture. So we have taken a couple of pictures, and let me thank everyone who joined us today. Wish you a pleasant evening ahead, and we'll connect again in future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks, Surabhi.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Ramji.
Bye.
Okay, thank you so much. Good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ravi.
Thank you. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Hello, Jayachandran. How are you?
I'm very
This is Chandrasekhar Bhatt speaking.
okay.
It was a pleasure. Yeah, I know. I know you. From Kerala University, right?